Welcome to the Institute's Time to Act Mental Health Echo. We're really glad to have you here today. If you'll take a minute and put your name and contact information into the chat. My name's Janelle Preston. I am the project coordinator over our Echo projects here at the Institute. And I'm always really excited to have these sessions and get going on them. As you noticed, we are recording today's session, so please don't hit that leave button. But by staying on, you are participating and consenting to be recorded. We do store these on our Canvas page for you to go back and utilize and share with colleagues or just re-look at that information. I know for myself, sometimes I need a few times to get that really solid in my brain. And so going back and reviewing these sessions are a great way to do that. We love interactions and participation in echo sessions. I know virtually it's easy to just turn off your camera, turn off mute, and be a passive listener. But just remember what it was like back when we would always get together in person and when we go to those trainings. It just is a way to re-energize us. So please put your comments into chat. Ask those questions, be engaged in that. We have a hub member, Kurt Phillips, who does monitor the chat for us that will make sure that those questions get answered. We also love case narratives. They're a great way to learn from everybody on this call, as well as share all of your guys' amazing knowledge with everybody. So if you're interested in doing a case narrative, please reach out to us and we will get you on the schedule. My cursor keeps on stopping, so I can't move it. But we are also sometimes talking about families that we work with, clients, and sensitive topics. So please make sure to protect their individual privacy. If you have any questions about how to de-identify, you can reach out to one of our amazing hub members. They all have an asterisk or will now have an asterisk in front of their name to make it easier to find in chat. So you don't have to scroll down through those chat features. Key components of an echo session is that we have a subject matter expert. I'm really excited about today's session. We were chatting earlier. Seems like it's been an exhausting long week, and so surviving that workplace burnout with Emma, and I'm just really excited to have her kind of refresh me and get me some skills to help me survive these long weeks that seem to be happening. And then we also have a case presentation. This case presentation, Jeff Sheen is going to be facilitating that for us. And so generating some ideas on how our workplace is already supporting our mental health or what we wish that we could have happen. So it's a little bit of a different kind of case presentation. So please stay on for that. It's going to be great. And then that's where some professional networking happens. In those small breakout groups or in these discussions, it just is a great way to connect with everybody and to know who's out there doing the same kind of work that we're all doing. If you need to learn or have a refresher on how to rename your profile, you can reach out to myself or Leo and we will help you do that. But I'm sure that we've all been on Zoom. Unless Zoom updates, we all kind of know where that's at. And it's always a good time when Zoom does do their updates. Going, where is that? Where did that move to? Raise your hand and your reaction features is just another way to be interactive in the sessions. But we do ask for some session etiquette. So be respectful of our presenter. Keep your questions brief and on topic. if you can introduce yourself and where you're from before asking a question, again, it just helps build that professional networking. So, like I see Cami on my screen right now, and if I wanted to know how to reach out to her, she's already told me where she works, so I can build that connection with her. Encourage you to turn on your cameras and again, just making that networking more meaningful. In order to get a credit of attendance, we do ask that you fill out a survey. A huge thank you to everybody who does complete those surveys. It's what we can take back to our funding agency to show the impact of this ECHO network and what is happening from your guys' perspective. We do know that sometimes surveys get to be painful to fill out. So there is a spot in there to put your contact and address and mailing address so that we can send out free swag to just say thank you for completing these surveys on top of that credit for attendance. Canvas is where we store everything. So PowerPoints, the recordings, all the case recommendations, any resources that are shared during that session, we store on our Canvas page. If you would like access to our Canvas page, please email timetoact@aggies.usu.edu and we will get you set up on the Canvas page. Just another plug for case studies. They are a great way to hear from everybody on this call, to learn about new resources. So if you have a case that you're kind of just stuck on or you want to just get more information, please reach out to us and we will get you on the schedule. We have some great Facebook and social media pages that we share information about, share all of our echoes, resources that are shared with us throughout the month. So if you want to take a minute and follow us on that, and I am going to stop sharing and turn the time over to Emma. And I'm going to spotlight her. There you go, Emma. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Okay. Let me share my screen here.
Your share. Yep.
Perfect. There we go. Well, thank you all for having me. I presented last year, and so I'm glad to be back with this group. It was great. I even have some notes I took from our session afterwards I incorporated into this presentation. So there's a couple of new things, but let me back up. So my name is Emma Parkhurst. I'm an associate professor with USU Extension at Davis County. If you're not familiar with Extension, we are part of Utah State University. However, we are local. So we have an agreement with the university, the local government, and the federal government to bring down that evidence-based, non-biased information from the university level down to the community in the form of workshops, online resources, one-day events, you name it. So we are in every county in the state except for Daggett. They share with a neighboring county because it is so small. So there's an extension office wherever you are. If you're interested in learning about what we do, we cover things like home and community is my department, so family and consumer sciences with nutrition, food preservation, mental health, physical activity. There's also horticulture, excuse me, the department is agriculture, natural resources. It's not my department, where it's more the ag side, horticulture, so gardening. That's really what Extension is known for. Probably most often is canning and gardening information, but we also work with youth, with 4-H, with youth leadership programs, and then there's a lot of things that fall in between. So that is Extension in a nutshell. And my background, I have a degree in health promotion and education. I'm a certified health education specialist, and I've been with the university for just about 8 years. So that's kind of where my background comes from. I used to work for the state health department and Salt Lake County Health Department and worksite wellness. So this is something I've always kind of had an interest in, and also because I work, it's something that I personally have an interest in is reducing or managing burnout. So this is what we're going to talk about today is introduction into burnout and stress, talk about the impact and the causes that it can lead to, and then we'll get into the good stuff. How do we prevent it in both the workplace and personal? Because although the main title is about workplace stress and burnout prevention or reduction, what we do in our personal life obviously carries over into our work life. We'll get into that later. And then we'll go over some resources as well. Okay, so what is stress and burnout? A lot of times when somebody says I'm so stressed out, it's a negative thing, right? And while unmanaged stress can lead to unwanted consequences where you're feeling that stress manifest in your shoulders or it's starting to make you irritable and you're snapping at colleagues, you're snapping at your family members or things start to slip through the cracks. I do want to acknowledge that there is positive stress as well. And that's the stress that I'm currently feeling, where you get a little bit of the jitters where you're presenting, or maybe it's kind of giving you that motivation to get something done. But when that positive stress is left unmanaged, that's when it can lead to burnout and other health problems, which we're going to talk about for the remainder of the session today. Um, oh, am I behind a slide? That's what stress and burnout is. There's the definition. There we go. That's from the University of Maryland. So, what is burnout then? Burnout is when stress takes that next step up. And so the World Health Organization has their definition that's on the screen, where it's characterized most commonly by these three different aspects. If you look up burnout, other organizations might include more things that fall into leading to burnout, but these are the three that are most commonly cited by the experts. And so we have that feeling of depletion or exhaustion, where we don't care. We're done. There's no energy. There's nothing left for me to give. And I'm sure this is something we have all felt in our life, whether it's in work or in other roles in our life. And it's something that we will continue to experience. And because life is kind of like a rolling hill, right? We have our high moments, we have our low moments. The important thing is that we have the right tools to get back into those high moments and get out of burnout or hopefully reduce it to where we don't experience it. So, sorry, my brain will go on tangents because this is an area that I present on a lot. And it's because it's something that really we all have experience in. Okay, so reduced proficiency or professional efficiency. I just combined those words. So we're at work, but we might not be giving our best quality of work, right? So that's where that absenteeism or presenteeism comes into play where yes, I am physically in my office, but mentally I am checked out because I'm done. I am cynical. I don't want to do anything. It's they're all working together against ourselves. And then maybe mentally feeling distant from our job or having negative feelings about it. And that's also where that cynicism comes into, where just having that detachment from your work or your responsibilities. Sometimes it can be accompanied by negative thoughts about people or tasks. And this is where our brain is wired for, unfortunately, seeing like the negative, because the negative is the threat. And whether or not we know it, our brain has been wired for generations and generations back to our ancestors to always look for the threat. Now, our threat isn't like a bobcat or whatever, saber-toothed lion, a predator coming at us in most times, but our brain perceives everyday stressors kind of the same way because we have evolved. So sorry, that's another tangent. So we're going to keep on going to try to figure out what contributes to burnout. And I really like two different models that we can look at here. The first one is the bathtub model. And I like this one because it really kind of gives a visual that most of us can relate to, like we've seen one way or another, right? So just knowing that there's a problem doesn't directly help people understand what to do about it. If that were the case, we'd all be the healthiest, happiest people in the world. But it takes a little bit more deeper understanding and then putting that understanding into action. So we have this bathtub here. And as you can see, the tub is personal agency. And your personal agency is an individual's ability to get things done. So a lot of time people have a set of skills that they can use to do things, as well as some degree of strength or to push through. That's where like that motivation comes from as well. And then they also have an amount of time that they can allocate to doing things. So we want to think about our personal agency like the water in the bathtub. When the bathtub is empty, that individual is in burnout. And the bathtub is filled by the results that people get. That's the number one results that people get. Number two, the support that they receive from others. And then number three, the self-care they perform for themselves. So while we are hopefully filling our bathtub, we also have that little pipe down there, the demands, the everyday demands that's draining the tub. So if we have this uneven, um, if our bathtub is draining too much, if our demands start to become overwhelming, we feel like things are starting to kind of slip through the cracks because we're not either seeing the results that we want to have, we're not feeling supported, or we're not practicing self-care. More water is leaving that bathtub than is being filled in. So we can kind of think of like how people are like, you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't take a bath in an empty bath, right? We can't perform when we are empty. And that's like self-preservation. That's not just us being stubborn, right? We're trying to protect ourselves, our mental capacity. And then another model that we can look at is the gap model. So while the bathtub is easy to conceptualize and makes a good visual, it kind of fails in situations when you might be getting great results and the demands placed on you aren't very large, but you still feel burnout. And that happens a lot as well. And that situation can be explained by the gap between these two main components. So the first component is expectations a person has for himself or herself. So these expectations are set both internally as well as informed by what others expect. And they're a pin on the map that people expect to reach. So an expert that explains that they got their expectations from their parents, right? Workaholics who raised them with high expectations for themselves would be like too high. Um, the second component is a person's perception of their results. So these are invariably not actual results, but they're the belief about those results. So their perception may be slightly better or slightly worse than what's actually being accomplished. And experts say that this is like that feeling when that missing component at a job where there's like a lack of what was needed and why we are working so hard. So it's hard to recognize the results a person achieves if it's not clear where the company is going or why it's heading in that direction. And now that gap between the results and the expectations is necessary to keep people striving towards their goals. But when someone can't adjust their expectations either way, or maybe their perceptions are too high or they're too low, you're not having enough tension in check. So the results can be devastating, both personally and for the organization. So if that gap between the expectations and the perceived results grows too large, then that it can like snap like a rubber band, right? And that's where we fall into burnout. And a lot of times that's where, especially in any like helping professions, where it's like, I'm getting good results. I could be doing more. Like the demands don't feel that bad, but I feel so burnt out. Sometimes it's like what's going on up here, right? Those self perceptions have to shift just a little bit to help us get out of that burnout. Okay, so then here are some of the most common signs of burnout. And the reason I include this in my presentation is so that we can build up our awareness. If we know what to look out for, we can hopefully stop it in its tracks, talk or implement some of the coping skills that we're going to be talking about towards the end of the presentation and avoid burnout. And hopefully we can start to talk about, or hopefully we can put what we're talking about into action into everyday life. So that way you're building up your resiliency to any stress and burnout that's going to come at you regardless of what's going on, right? So we have chronic fatigue. That's when you're waking up exhausted even after a full night's sleep. Increased irritability. These are small inconveniences that can feel like major frustrations. Lack of motivation. That's tasks that once brought satisfaction now feel either overwhelming or even pointless. And then physical symptoms. This can look different for a lot of people. It can be headaches, it can be digestive issues, it can be changes in your sleep or appetite, it can be body aches. I keep doing this. I'm like, I feel my stress right here today. It's right in my left shoulder blade. So it can be different for it can be different for everyone. There was one person in a class who said their tension was like in their toes. So really kind of getting in tune with your body can help you kind of clock into these physical symptoms. And then isolation or emotional detachment. This is anytime you feel yourself withdrawing from friends or family or social obligations that you would normally want to go to. Because we want to acknowledge that there's an introvert in all of us. Our social battery will run out and we're like, no, I'm done. But this is when it's something that you would look forward to, that you normally enjoy, that you notice you're shying away from. You're saying no, you're going home and maybe engaging in behaviors that might not be good for your body or your brain. So if you start to notice any of these symptoms, it's important that we take attention and take immediate steps to kind of regain that balance, or that I say balance, but we know that there's no such thing as work-life balance, right? They're never going to be exactly the same. It's like a flow. We keep things in check. There's different seasons of life where something might take priority over one another, to where it works for whatever phase of life you're in. Okay, so we're going to talk about the causes and the impact of burnout. And I'm like, how many years are we down the road from COVID? But we have to talk about it because it introduced a situation that many of us have never been in, where we're socially isolating. We are isolating from work. We're working from home. We're not getting that interaction. And this is an older survey from 2022, but basically, adults they reported that their lives have been changed and it hasn't bounced back. Whether that's worse mental health or lower physical activity, disturbed sleep, increased reliance on unhealthy habits or behaviors. And this all happened because our our daily norm was totally thrown for a loop. And this has led to burnout for a lot of people, or it's lowered their their personal agency. So their tub is now lower than it used to be. So they're reaching burnout faster. So how did we get here? There's a lot of different things that can fill, I guess, I don't want to say fill because we're talking about the tub, that can lead to burnout. And there's an APA survey of thousands of employees across various industries that report workload to be the largest driver of burnout. So having too many things to do is the number one driver of burnout. And it could be easy things to do, right? I was just talking to one of my staff assistants that her job is what most people would call relatively easy, but then they start getting more roles and responsibilities piled on. They're like, oh, this is an easy step. Okay, here's one more thing. This is really easy. To the point where her role statement is supposed to be this short. It's now miles long and it's leading to stress and it's leading to burnout. So really kind of keeping an eye on that workload can be really helpful. On the flip side, research shows that recognition is one of the most important protective factors. So it seems really simple and that it should be happening, but it's something that is so commonly overlooked because it is so simple, right? So that positive recognition, whether it's from supervisors, the organization, or either also from peers, peer-to-peer recognition has a lot of great research on being a protective factor. So I'm trying to think of what my other images are supposed to show. Let's see here. So it could be poor pay or compensation, which oftentimes are out of our control. And that leads to more stress because it's not in our control and you want to control it. And it elicits a lot of emotions, right? We already talked about workload, misaligned values. So not having the same values as the organization that you're with, or maybe even in your personal life, your values they have been left behind because you're going through the autopilot mode. Negative relationships as well can be a big contributor to workload. So and then also, this wasn't in my presentation, but there's so much going on in the world right now. And we have a first row seat to it because of our phones. So in addition to everything that's happening at work, we see everything that's happening across the world. And our brains were never meant to be able to handle all that information at once. And so we have everything happening at work and we have everything happening, in the world, and then we have our personal life as well. So it's understandable that everyone gets overwhelmed and reaches burnout. Um, it's a normal thing that happens. Let me rephrase that. It's a common thing that happens, but we want to make sure that it doesn't become like normalized and it's cool to be burnt out or whatever. You can think about it that way, right? We don't want that to happen. So like I've mentioned a couple of times, burnout is not caused solely by stressful work or too many responsibilities. There's other factors that contribute to burnout, including your lifestyle, your personality traits, in addition to work. So they've even found that what you do in your downtime and how you look at the world can play just as big of a role in causing overwhelming stress as work or home demands. So a lot of it needs to be some change or just some tweaks in our thoughts that are happening. But let's talk a little bit about lifestyle. So this is what the research has shown that leads, these are like the most common factors that lead to burnout in your lifestyle. Working too much without enough time for socializing or relaxing, a lack of close or supportive relationships, taking on too many responsibilities without enough help from others, and then not getting enough sleep. I went to a public health conference a handful of years ago, and the one thing I remember is that our presenter said if there was a magic pill for health, it's sleep. Sleep can impact so many things in your life. And if you're not getting enough of it, it's going to impact all other dimensions in your life. So starting with sleep can be a really great place to start, um, because it is a form of self-care, and it's something that we to an extent have control over, right? Making sure that you're at the right environment, that you're setting some boundaries of, for example, I have a hard boundary of I love reading at night. Like my Kindle is my favorite sleeping pill. It knocks me out. I love it. But if I don't pay attention to the time, I'll read all night. Like I love reading so much. So I have my little timer, and once 10 o'clock hits, that's my boundary. I close my Kindle and I go to sleep. So really kind of holding those boundaries for yourself, whatever it is in your life that works well, um, finding a boundary and then holding yourself accountable to it. And then personality. So some traits with personality that can lead to burnout, those perfectionistic tendencies where nothing is ever good enough, pessimistic view of yourself and the world. Again, right now, that might be more common. Um, the need to be in control or having a reluctance to delegate to others. That's me in my personal life. Once I became a mother, I was like, I want to do all of this the right way. I'm not gonna like husband stand aside. I've got this. And then I was like, uh-oh, I've got some postpartum anxiety happening. I've got some postpartum depression, and it all intermixed together. So really paying attention to your personality trait can be so helpful for figuring out what's a trigger, what's something that is going to help your personality or help your situation when stress arises so we can avoid burnout. And then, of course, work, right? So these are things that we might not have a lot of control over, like little to no autonomy, not having control over your work, lack of recognition or reward for a good job, having unclear or overly demanding job expectations, doing work that's monotonous or unchallenging. If it's all unchallenging, that's where it can lead to that stress and just that, um, where you don't feel connected to your work, the values don't align. It can be helpful to have some monotonous things in your job if you don't have a very monotonous job. And then working in a chaotic or a high pressure environment where it's just constantly tense, that can take a toll on your stress level and your ability to cope with that stress. So why does this matter? And it's because we matter, right? We need to put ourselves first as a person, and then employees second. Don't tell your managers that, or do. Right? We'll change it at the workplace. So there's a guide to protecting your well-being, or some steps that we can take to protecting your well-being, whether it's from work, personal life, the weight of unmet expectations. Burnout is a significant challenge in today's really fast-paced life, performance-driven world, especially because we live in this culture of upward comparisons where we're constantly measuring ourselves against those further along than us, which can really leave us feeling inadequate. Or we can get buried under growing workload with little institutional support. One critical takeaway is that extreme stress has the power to diminish your sense of self and agency. So it really shakes your character. It can leave you feeling hopeless, and in some cases, it can lead to depression and anxiety. And while burnout from life stressors is by no means the same as exposure to or witnessing a life-threatening event, they both have the power to demoralize us. So when burnout goes unchecked, it can strip away our agency, push us down a slippery slope to emotional and mental exhaustion. And the reason I compare the burnout to a life-threatening event is because a lot of times when we talk about burnout, it's like, oh, it's just stress. It's just burnout. When in reality, it can have devastating effects on our mental health and our physical health, our overall well-being. So it's an important thing to focus on. And there's that, there's that exact quote right there. So the reason why workplace burnout, workplace stress is so important is because we spend on average 90,000 hours of our lifetime at work. Some people might spend more than that. Some people might spend less than that, but we're spending a lot of time at the workplace. So it makes sense that this is an area that we need to focus on burnout because we're there so often. And a happy, healthy workforce is a good, a happy and healthy workforce is good for employees and organizations, especially the bottom line, right? If we're talking to the people at the very top, having happy, healthy people working for you is going to help the bottom line. And that's what most people at the top care about. So if we can have somebody that's in a well-positioned or somebody that is a well-positioned leader and they can help influence a positive culture shift and normalize mental health in the workplace, it can boost employee mental health, boost company morale, and the bottom line. So let's talk about just a little bit what we can do in the workplace. And this is more so about people that have the power at the top to make policy change, or perhaps you can take this away as an advocate of policy change if you're not in a place where you can do that. And this is just kind of a model that shows you that there are a lot of different things that go into work-life balance. Um, we have our organizational policies, we have individual awareness and education, and then we also have environmental factors. So there's a lot at play here. And rather than getting overwhelmed that there's where to start first, we're going to focus on just a couple of things. And what some things that employers can do is that we can really start to prioritize mental health programs. We can train our managers and our supervisors, even just providing like training on anything. I found working for the university, once you get like a supervisor role, I'm hungry for those trainings. And sometimes they're not there until you poke at people. And it can be so beneficial because if you're a supervisor and you don't have supervisor training, oh boy, it's rough. I've been there. I've been that supervisor. I've had to kind of figure out what I'm doing. Anyway, employers can also provide flexibility, whether that's giving permission to employees to, flex their time. If that's something that works in somebody's organization to flex time, if they're salaried, or just acknowledge that life happens and it's okay if you're not at your desk at 8 o'clock, maybe 8:15 is fine. Having that understanding. Health insurance, obviously, is one that the data shows if by providing health insurance, it can help prevent burnout. Listening and acting. So, not necessarily having an open door policy, but having a policy where you are listening to your employees, but then you also have a step two where you're going to act on it. Even if that action is looking into making the change that the employee is suggesting and saying, I looked into it and I'm so sorry, there's nothing I can do about it. Here are some alternatives. Looking at equity, diversity, and inclusion policies. And then I already talked about mental health programs. And then some factors. There are 6 factors that contribute to workplace resiliency, and this is based on the areas of work-life survey. And so they include workload, recognition, community, control, fairness, and purpose. And they have observed that employers that do each of these have happier and more engaged workforces. And then in the organizations that don't do these things well, people are leaving and seeking employment elsewhere. And that's kind of a culture shift as well, is that older generations might say that they would stick with a job, right? Once they were hired, they would stay there, whether or not they liked it. Whereas a younger generation is starting to put their mental health first or closer to first and saying if like the values don't align, if they're not happy, then they're going to seek employment elsewhere. And it's something that employers need to acknowledge and start to consider as they are changing their policies. And now I recognize that probably most of us don't have power to make any of those changes. We do have the power to maybe nudge either your administration or your leadership into the right direction. But let's talk about these personal methods because these are things that we have control over that we can do. And the following tips are all evidence-based. So the science shows that they work. And as we go through these strategies, pay attention to see if any of them resonate with you. And maybe choosing one to start with after the presentation, maybe the rest of this week starting with one of them. And some of these tips might not work for you, and that's okay. It's not a one size fits all approach. It can even be a process of elimination. So trying something and deciding, yeah, this is great, or no, this is awful, and then finding something different. Okay, so setting boundaries. This is a big one because your time and energy it should be sacred to us, right? We want to protect it for not only our what we're doing at work, but also what we're doing in our personal lives as well. And so protecting your time and energy by setting clear boundaries, this can look like limiting uh, your personal space, your emotions, your relationships. It can look like rules you set to establish safe and permissible interactions, which protects your autonomy and your well-being. And the boundaries can be shaped by your personality and your culture. They can maintain your selfhood and prevent overextension. The main thing with boundaries is usually the boundary setter knows that it's coming from a place of protection and self-preservation, and you're not trying to set a boundary to say, I don't like you, you can't, but you're not trying to be mean, basically, is what I'm trying to say. It's not coming from a place to be negative. It's actually coming from a place to build positivity and move forward. The people that might be on the experiencing end of the boundary might have different perspective. And the way that we can set these boundaries and honor them is to set them early and explain, like, why am I setting this boundary? And that's shown to have the one of the best steps to oh my gosh, my brain here, hold on, stating what the boundary is early, following it can really set you off to a good step in holding the boundary, because that's the hard part, right, is honoring the boundary. Sometimes we're like, oh, it's okay, and we'll let that boundary get overstepped, and then it's more likely to be overstepped again and again and again, even if it's yourself, if it's a self boundary that you're setting and you're letting yourself go over it. So really setting them early and clear can be helpful. So there are some things that you can do that looks like boundary setting, like prioritizing tasks, saying no to less critical ones or delegating them, having clear work hours and honoring those work hours, setting aside time for relaxation or hobbies outside of work. It can be anything. The the key is that you are enhancing your self-awareness and assertiveness for a fulfilling life. And boundaries have been set or have been shown to build trust and respect in relationships. They can support healthy interdependence without sacrificing autonomy. And without boundaries, the risks can include manipulation, codependency, or emotional exhaustion. And that's what we're focusing on here, is that emotional exhaustion. Okay, so now we have mindfulness and stress management. Mindfulness has been a buzzword for at least the past 10 years because it works. It's being present in the moment. It has been shown time and time again to stop stress, to manage stress, to decrease stress wherever you're at in your stress level. It can help us feel grounded when you start to feel that overwhelming sense of, like, oh my gosh, things are just starting to become too much, where that stress is going to, on that slippery slope to become burnout. So some things that are mindful activities, you can, if you're somebody that enjoys meditation, there's so many free guided meditations out there. It can be simply stepping outside and taking a breath and having a mantra that you're saying. And it can be just like a minute or two. It doesn't have to be these 10 to 15-minute long meditations. It can be just a quick break where you're taking a breath. Let me check in with my body. How am I feeling? Am I hungry? Do I need a break? Do I need to walk around? That's mindfulness, right? How am I feeling right now? It can also look like journaling. There is so much research that shows journaling, specifically gratitude journaling, has such an impactful, a positive impact on our mental health and our physical health, and it can bleed into other areas of our life. So, journaling can be something that you can use to clear your mind or process stress. There's like rage journals where you can get out your frustration and you tear out the page and you throw it away, and that act is signaling to your brain that I'm letting the stress go. So really, again, kind of like dabbling in different areas of mindfulness to figure out what works for you and what doesn't is a great place to get started. I, for one, I am not a meditator. My brain will take me elsewhere and I'll start like singing songs, or I'll start thinking about what I need to do. But I do really like just going outside, or I like just doing deep breaths where I literally have something in my brain that I'm like counting my breaths, like the box breathing. Okay, and then self-care. So self-care can look like a lot of different things. I want us to kind of think beyond the spa day or treating yourself to something, which is still self-care. I do want to acknowledge that that is self-care, but it's a little bit more superficial and um, instantaneous. Whereas the self-care that we're going to talk about is more intentional steps to nurture your body and your mind and your spirit. So this could look like scheduling your doctor exams, right? Making sure that you're checking in with your physical health, being consistent in your hours of sleep. It's just as beneficial to have a consistent length of sleep as it is to have like 9 to 10 hours or whatever it is for everybody. Um, the research shows that having consistent bedtime hours and wake up hours can be really beneficial to have restful sleep, is basically what I'm trying to say. And then eating balanced meals to stabilize your energy and level and to reduce irritability. And a soapbox of mine is that I am a key believer of moderation is key. Health at every size, that kind of mindset. I love that research that shows, weight is not an indicator of health. So making sure, yes, eating balanced meals, but that also includes enjoying the things that you enjoy, right? Making sure that you do treat yourself every once in a while. I'm a big treat person, but keeping that mindfulness, that intentionality behind it, and making sure that we're getting all different food groups, we're nourishing our body and our mind is super, super important, and making sure you're eating enough too. I'm sure in helping professions, it's so easy to forget to eat, and or you'll just get to it later and you miss those first hunger cues and then it leads to hanger. That's my family. My daughter is my son, and oh my gosh, my daughter is just like my husband. They get so hangry, and as soon as they have a little bite to eat, it's like, oh, they're a new person. So helping them keep track of like, oh, it's time to eat before we get to that hanger. It can happen to all of us. And then moving your body. So finding a way that you enjoy movement is going to be really helpful for your stress levels, all around mental health as well as physical health. And the key here is finding something that you enjoy. If you don't like running, maybe don't go running. Instead, try just a walk, try rollerblading, try pickleball, anything that you enjoy, yoga. It can really help to reduce stress. And then social connection is huge. Where, especially after COVID, they have found that that isolation does a huge number on your mental health, which then leads to physical health consequences. And it again bleeds into every other area of your life. So connecting with others is a form of prevention that we can lean into, whether it's with your coworkers, whether it's talking with somebody on the phone. Really, that face to face is going to be the best connection that we can get, but I don't want to diminish other forms of connection as well. So making sure that you're connecting with people can be really helpful for self-care. And last time I did this presentation, somebody mentioned that living a life that aligns with your values can be a form of self-care. And I was like, I love that, because we get into autopilot mode so often that we kind of forget about our values, even like the silly ones that we might have that might not seem like important values to, or like the top tier values, right? Like living a joyful life, right? That is something that I value. And there are times where I'm like, oh my gosh, 2 weeks have passed by and I haven't seen my friends. Like I haven't done anything fun. And so that's something that is a value in my life. And so just taking time to reevaluate what your values are and making sure that you're living true to them is absolutely a form of self-care. Okay, reframing perspective. So we want to change the way that we see our responsibilities. That mindset can combat burnout. It's that self-talk. It can be so easy to have that negative self-talk, and it takes work to change it and to change that perspective. So instead of seeing things as burdens, we can see them as opportunities of growth. So focus on the positive aspects of your job and your personal life. Break larger tasks into more smaller and manageable pieces, celebrating small victories to stay motivated. There's a lot of research behind celebration and how if you are able to take a larger task, break it down into a smaller one, you're more likely to be successful, and experiencing that success is going to wire your brain to continue on. So experiencing that success and then rewarding yourself from that success is a way to get that intrinsic or that internal motivation to keep going. And then avoiding complaining just to vent. And that one's hard for me. I like to vent. And sometimes a little bit of venting it can be good, but just making sure that you give the person you're venting to the heads up that I feel like I need to vent. Is that okay that I do that with you? And if they say no, then be like, okay, that's totally fine. Sometimes I look like a crazy person that I'll be in my car and I'll just be talking to myself, and it's me getting my thoughts out, getting my vents out to nobody, and it helps. It really does. It can be this kind of the same thing as like the rage journal. So being aware of how often we're venting just to complain. If it's venting to try to figure out a solution, that's different. Okay, taking breaks. We need to take more breaks. Our society has set us up to where it's like I'm at my job, I'm gonna work and I'm gonna work and I'm gonna work and then I'm gonna go home. Taking breaks is so crucial to avoiding burnout. The more breaks or taking breaks can lead to more energy, which leads to more attentional capacity, and we can be more productive. Though the problem is that in our current society, we neglect to take meaningful breaks. So what I mean by meaningful breaks is that something that we want to take into consideration is when we're taking the break, right? So a lot of times, if you can think about when you have been in a big project, or maybe it was like a school paper, and you're interrupted mid-sentence and you come back to that sentence like an hour later, you're like, my flow is gone. Like, I don't know where my it's hard to get back into what the work that you were doing. So waiting to take a break at what's like the break point or that natural stopping point of a task can be really helpful. So once you're at the end of that paragraph or breaking that task into smaller things, that's like, okay, I'm done with that. I'm going to go take a quick break and then I'll come back. Um, People will oftentimes multitask instead of taking breaks because in their brain, it's kind of like taking a break from that task. I'm going to move to this task and then I'll come back to this task. And while it might be like, yeah, that makes sense, or a lot of people think that they can multitask really well, the science tells us otherwise. They have found a correlation between frequency of attention switching and stress. So the faster the attention switching happens, the more your stress goes up. And they measured this with heart rate monitors. And so they have decades of research showing that when people multitask, they experience stress. And when you're experiencing more stress, you're more likely to make more errors. So every time you switch your attention, you have to reorient to that new activity, and it takes a bit of time. And in the research, they call this switch cost. So you're also losing time by multitasking. So that's my soapbox for taking a break instead of multitasking. And here are some ways that we can take breaks and disconnect. Um, if you're somebody who lives by your calendar, calendaring in a break instead of doing meeting after meeting, giving yourself that 10 or 15-minute time to buffer where I need to step outside for a minute. I need to go take a break. I need to go get a sweet treat. I need to go get a glass of water. I need to use the restroom, whatever it is you do in your break. Eating lunch away from your desk and your phone, that's one that's really common. That's an easy place for most people to start. Setting boundaries for checking emails after hours, whether that's something that works well in your position or not. And then planning regular vacations or mental health days for a recharge. There's a lot of research that shows that we need to be taking a 2-week vacation for a true recharge. And there's also a lot of people that that doesn't work with. So the alternative is taking maybe like 1 or 2 days here or there, or scheduling in those meaningful breaks where you might not have the option to take those long vacations, but I can take a break and I can make sure that I'm paying attention to my self-care while I'm on the job. Okay, we're almost done. Hobbies and interests. So having an identity outside of work is super important when it comes to preventing uh, burnout. What this can and hobbies can be like anything. So I'm not even gonna, I didn't include examples of hobbies because it's anything that you like to do that is just for fun. It's just for leisure. We're not doing it to make like a side gig or anything like that. It is a true hobby. We like to do it. Um, and so yeah, okay, there we go. And there's there's a lot of research that is focused right now about crafting and your stress levels and your overall mental health. And there's a study that had, I think it was over 3,500 knitters and crocheters. that 81% of respondents with depression reported feeling happier or less depressed after knitting, and more than half reported feeling very happy. So there's all different types of tactile hobbies, things that you're doing with your hand that you're creating that leads to reduced stress. It helps relieve and reduce depression and anxiety. It can help work on your self-esteem. It decreases your risk of cognitive impairment as you age. It can help with insomnia. It can help with irritability and restlessness, builds community and friendships, and then it can even help with the grief process. I thought that one was fascinating. Um, Loss is something that none of us can escape, right? Grief comes for us all at one point or another. And during points of deep grief, it can seem impossible that you'll ever feel able to function again. And this study showed that crocheting and knitting specifically can be one of the most comforting things during that time. It's something that you can do without a lot of money or effort. It's something that you can do in small bits when you have the energy. And it can, for a moment, take your mind off of your pain. So the textures, the colors of the yarn, the warmth of the item that you're creating, the beautiful up and down motion of that, the stitch upon stitch can get you feeling one day or can get you um, one day closer to feeling okay again. So I thought that was fascinating that it can help with grief. You don't think about, I'm going to craft so I don't feel so I can so I can help with my grief process.
Emma,
And
this
oh,
is
Yeah.
Kurt. I just want to go back if we can. Somebody asked a question about the vacation. It said 2 weeks. The question was 2 weeks combined vacation or 2 weeks you're taking at one time?
The study that I saw and I see time and time again is always combined, but that's like the gold star, right? And that is just not doable for a lot of us. I personally, I know myself, and that's something we need to keep in consideration when it comes to data, right? Is that this is what the group at large it works for, but we're all individuals at the end of the day, and what might work for some people might not work for another. The idea of not checking my email for 2 weeks raises my blood pressure. Like I am somebody who I take comfort in checking my emails when I'm not at work. And while I'm on vacation, I check my emails because I don't want to come back after 2 weeks to hundreds of emails. Sorry, that kind of got a little off tangent from that comment. But yes, the study that I had seen was uh what's that word? Together, consecutive, 2 consecutive weeks. But it can be any amount of time. There is still positive research with any time taken off. Okay. So the last or the second to last, I should say, that we're going to talk about is connecting and shining. So this is really just looking for opportunities to contribute in a meaningful way, whether that's at work, whether that's at home, in the community. When we are able to contribute our time in and our energy in something that has meaning, it gives us meaning in return. So this can look like volunteering. Obviously, there's a lot of research that is um, linked with volunteerism and positive mental health. It can look like feeling appreciated for your efforts. That can lead to more energy and motivation, and in return, doing that for somebody else. So that's again where recognition comes into play in the workplace, the number one protective factor with burnout. And then again, it's connecting with people face to face and limiting contact with negative people. So doing something that you know that you're good at, right? And it makes you feel good. There's science behind it. Okay, and the last one I want to talk about is reflective resiliency. So, reflective resiliency is about processing experiences to turn setbacks into opportunities for change, like rethinking a failure as a learning moment. And in a world of constant change, reflective resilience can help us adapt proactively, not just react. Because a lot of time that's what's happening once we're in burnouts. We're reacting to it. We're already there. Now we're trying to fix it. So if we can act proactively by using reflective resilience, it can be really helpful. And reflective resilience builds emotional intelligence and self-efficacy. It reduces burnout by fostering empathy and perspective, and then it turns those stressors into growth opportunities. So there's a lot of research out there um, on therapists and workers that shows reflective practices improve mood, life satisfaction, and the ability to handle uncertainty. And there's so many benefits. It like we already mentioned, it builds empathy and it strengthens resilience through connection. social connection. I'm sure we all know this in one way or another. The it's also a magic pill for health. There we go. It's something that can help in all aspects of our wellness. I don't know if you all remember, there was a time, at least in the health promotion world, where people were saying sitting is the new smoking, right? Where like sitting for a long time, it has really bad consequences, just as smoking does. Well, now it's social isolation is the new smoking, right? It seems like such a silly thing that social connecting or not having social connection can have as dire consequences as smoking, but it can. It's a crazy thing. Having our brains, we need this connection. So it is a strong protective factor. Having those supportive relationships can reduce your stress, improve your well-being, lower the risk of turning to unhealthy coping strategies, and some ways that we can practice reflective resiliency is journaling. So, really kind of getting introspective. What triggers my stress? What did I do well? What could improve? What's one actionable step for next time? So, it's a little bit more intentional journaling. Mindfulness, again, it's right, it's part of that resilience process. Deep breathing or meditation, just to kind of notice what thoughts are kind of going in through your brain without any judgment, and then reflecting on them. And then seeking support. So you could either share reflections with a trusted friend group or a family member or a therapist to gain perspective and accountability, just to kind of get that support person there. Doesn't matter who it is. It's as long as it's a trusted person to you. And then there, on the other side of the screen, those are the components of reflective resilience. I realized I completely forgot to acknowledge that when I was talking about the introduction of reflective resiliency. So it is self-awareness. So that's noticing your emotions and your reactions during stress. So the next time you're stressed out, pause for a second and think, how am I feeling right now? Like, how is stress and how are my emotions affecting me? Because we're all different. Um, Future focus. So we want to plan new strategies based on our reflections. So maybe, let's see here. What's one example I can think of? When I was in grad school, I had two jobs. I worked as a children's fitness instructor and I worked for the Salt Lake County Health Department. And by the end of the day, I was like so done. I was so and the stress was like little stress. It was just going from job to job after school and not having enough time for myself that I was like, okay, I'm so stressed out. I'm gonna go get my Takis. I'm gonna go get my Dr. Pepper. I'm gonna go sit in front of Netflix for hours upon hours and just chill out. And I was like, this is great. I'm de-stressing. And then there was one day I was like, I don't feel great. I paused and I reflected. And I was like, I feel awful. Like my stomach hurts from the Takis. I didn't do anything that I needed to do. I didn't make time for physical activity. And I feel the mental benefits pretty much immediately with physical activity. So having that future focus after you are aware of what you're already doing, thinking, okay, what can I change next time? And being kind to yourself too, right? We don't want to beat ourselves up, being like, oh, I should know better. I'm in the health field. That doesn't help anybody, right? Being kind to yourself and saying, okay, tomorrow's a new day. I'm going to start over. And that's kind of where evaluation comes in, that and you analyze your past actions, what worked and what didn't, and then reframing, right? Changing those negative thoughts. It's an opportunity to grow. It's not a time to beat yourself up. Okay, that was a really abrupt stop. So that was the last slide. And I realized that was a lot of information. And so I'm happy to kind of revisit any slides if you have any other questions. I do have a really short survey. This is just to tell me that you are learning what we're hoping you're learning. And if you're not, then what can I do better? Right? This is me evaluating my teaching. Um, but yeah, I can pull up the chat so I can actually see what's been shared here, but I'm happy to share any resources that I used, um, or if anybody has anything they want to share. Although I don't want to get into that. That's the next part, right?
Yes. So, um, yes. So, Jocelyn, that is different than the one from the survey that's being dropped into the chat. So this one is specific for Emma on the QR code, and the other one is for Echo. And then if anybody has any questions or thoughts, we'll open it up to discussion for a minute. And I just want to say I liked the idea of a rage journal. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of rage painting before. And you go to that and like they just have blaring music and you're just splashing paint everywhere. Me and some friends did that. It was so fun.
That's awesome.
Um,
I was going to say, Emma, not a question necessarily, just a thank you for what you taught today. I serve two roles where I'm at. I'm partly administrative, partly service provider. And so I get both sides of that. And your presentation was so good to say, here's things that administrators can do to build a better culture. And here's things that providers or employees can do to help prompt those administrators and to help manage our own burnout and our own stress. So great presentation. And yeah, Takis and Dr. Pepper, that can only last a day or two. And then, especially if you get those blue heat Takis, those things will wreck your stomach real quick. So
I'm gonna
hats
say,
off that you can
luckily,
last more than one day.
yeah, luckily my talkie of choice was the original. Yeah,
and then,
we were talking before the presentation started that, it's a good time for reminders. This for a lot of people, at least in the extension world, we're diving into busy season, especially like school's ending, kids are coming back home, trying to figure out childcare while you still have to work. You know, it's it's a good time of year to reflect and say, how am I doing?
yeah. There's also a question in there that says, could we get a link in addition to the QR code? She's watching from her phone.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I can do that as soon as I unshare it.
Okay. All right. JC, Jeff, Mr. Sheen, are you there?
I'm here.
All
Can you hear
right.
me all right?
Yep.
All right. So huge thank you, Emma, for the work that you're doing. I'm an associate professor in the social work department at USU, and our colleagues at Extension are just out there doing amazing things. And so it's always nice to have an Extension person here. Uh, so now I've got a huge version of myself on my screen. So thanks, Janelle. Now I want to go rage paint. Whatever you did, I have just like I'm looking in the mirror talking. So
Good.
I'm
Well, you're
gonna,
spotlighted for everybody now.
yeah,
So,
yeah, that's fantastic for me. Um, the plan for today, and Janelle, you're gonna have to remind me, like we're gonna still break into small groups, and I'm just doing like the intro piece of what we want people
yep.
to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. A couple of things I want to tie into, like what Emma was saying though, and one of the things when she was talking about the bottom line, I was reflecting on those of us that are here in the human services. Our bottom line is humans, services to humans, human service, right? The bottom line isn't profit. The bottom line isn't exponential growth, whatever market share, all of those other things that are important to people. Um, our bottom line is how do we provide better service to the families and the individuals and the communities that we're serving? That's what we care about. So when we talk about improving the bottom line, I think that's really gets back to all of us and the why we're doing this in the first place. The why we're here is that bottom line of providing more supports, better outcomes for the people in our communities that we care about, right? So I think that's really powerful, that conversation about the bottom line. I also appreciate what Emma said about what we're going to go into a little exercise here in a minute is not about venting to complain. This is why Janelle wants me to do this front end piece, because it is easy when you're feeling burnt out to just naturally go into like, this is all of the things that are wrong. And I feel that. Had the opportunity to hear Emma last year. And I think Emma last year I heard you, I was feeling pretty burnt out. So I was just kind of like a little cynical, like, yeah. And this time I'm in a completely different spot. And part of that's because I've been implementing some things and some things have shifted. And I'm feeling like really energized about work right now. And so that idea that you talk about, it ebbs and flows, right? Even if you're here today and you're burnout and you're just like, somebody told me I had to be here, whatever it is, we're going to kind of focus on what we call solution focused conversation. We're going to talk about what is either working well for you right now or what has worked well for you in the past. So if there's a time that you haven't felt burnt out, what was going well? So it's a reflection back on something that worked well, or it's a what's going well right now for you. And this is a great time for my headphones to die. So let me switch my audio really quick. All right. Still hear me all right?
Yep.
Great. So the idea is we're going to break into these small groups and we're going to talk about, and this is why you're the case study, right? It wouldn't make sense when we're like, oh, here's this fictional person that's burnt out. What should we do to help them? You all know what it feels like to be burnt out. You know what it feels like to be really invigorated by your work and really passionate. You know those ebbs and flows for yourself. And more importantly, you know where you're at today. I have no idea where you're all at today. Janelle, I have some ideas with the rage painting and things like that, and I've known her for years. Kurt, I kind of have a sense of when he's cracking dad jokes, I kind of know where he's at. But the rest of you have no idea where you're at today. So that's why you're the case study. You're the expert on your experience. So when you get into your small groups, we really want to focus on what's working well or has worked well for you in the past to address burnout at either the individual level, so something you've done individually, or something that you have seen in the workplace, whether you're an administrator or a service provider. So you can take it to the individual level, or you can take it to more of your professional context. I teach an administrative policy class for master's students in social work. We were just having this conversation 2 weeks ago. If you're in an administrative position, it's this interesting space where you're kind of responsible to keep the morale up for other people that might be burnt out. And you might also be, you can get burnt out by helping burnt out people. It's this layer, right? And so if that's part of your experience, bring that into the conversation. What did you do in those moments as an administrator who was like trying to lift morale and also working with your own stuff, right? So that's the first kind of a question. The second question is solution focused. You know, I'm a social worker, so we talk about solution focused therapy practices, things like that. Second question is, if you went to bed tonight and woke up tomorrow and you were not less burnt out or not burnt out tomorrow, what would have changed? What is the vision? Like, what would be fundamentally different when you walked in, if you walked into the office tomorrow? So say tonight you go home, you're burnt out, you do your talkies, you do your Dr. Pepper, you do your Netflix, and you go to sleep and magical creatures come and you walk in the office tomorrow and suddenly you're not burnt out anymore. What is it that, what is letting you know that you're not burnt out? What are you noticing that's different? Because when we figure that out, then we can start to work towards, well, how do we make that actually happen without the magical creature part, right? And then the third question is, any other ideas that you think in this context, building community, might help your peers? You've been through an experience, you like, this is really the thing. Emma gave us a lot of really great ideas, a lot of really practical tools. I'm a person that's into meditation. And the cool thing about meditation, Emma, is we want your thoughts to go everywhere. As soon as you notice that you're singing a song, you're meditating. As soon as you notice that you're thinking, you're meditating, right? It's not about an absence of thought or an absence of distraction. It's just noticing that, oh my gosh, I was eating Takis and now I'm singing a show tune. Wow, come back to that present moment, right? So if those are things that you found that are working for you, we want to kind of hear about it in these small groups, and then we'll come back and we'll share. So this is kind of the idea. What's working well or has for you in the past? What would be different tomorrow if you were less burnt out? And then let's talk about any other ideas that we have. And Emma, if you're sticking around, that's fantastic. We'd love to have you part of that conversation. Okay, Janelle.
All right, Leo, go ahead and open up those breakout groups. Are we all back, Leo? All right. So I know that we had some great discussions. I'll let which Heather took notes.
That was me.
All right, Heather M.
So we got the question about magical creatures. Sorry, I just really loved the way that JC phrased that, but we got magical change. For us, a lot of the change that we talked about, like, what things would look like for us the next day had to do with, personality traits, right? being in the fields that we're in, a lot of us are there just because of our personality. So a lot of it, I think, is self-assessment or self-awareness, recognizing that if it were all better, a lot of that would be being aware of how much we impact what we do and how we get burned out because of the way that we hold ourselves to a certain standard or how we criticize ourselves, and making adjustments and allowances for that and making those more realistic.
Yeah. Oh,
And then the other thing that we talked about is just we work in a world and in a lot of fields where resources a lot of times are limited, but the work is not. And for that reason, it's just so super important to be aware of how do we make our own resources and how do we tap into those. We are incredibly intelligent people, and we are very creative, and we are very good at what we do, and that's why we do it, and that's why we're here. And so using those skills for ourselves and helping ourselves in those ways, making sure that we're aware that we use some of that ingenuity to help ourselves. So making sure that we have personal connections with one another, making sure that we remember why we're where we are and that we remember the intentionality of what it is that we're doing when we're overwhelmed by what we're doing. Making sure that we're advocating for resources that we know are important, and that we're accessing the ones that are available. And then making sure that we're using trainings to help us understand that what we're experiencing is very real, and it's not a reflection on our incapabilities.
yeah, those are great things. Thanks, Heather. Kurt, I know you took notes. Share one idea before I wrap us all up.
Yeah, I think the main idea we came out with was that we need to set boundaries and make sure that we know where our work-life balance is, and that'll help with burnout. One thing JC did say, Jeff said, was the difference between being overwhelmed and being burned out is that when you're burned out, just means that your coping strategies aren't working anymore. I thought that was really an important thing to know because we're all going to feel overwhelmed at some point. But when we've gone through that overwhelm for long enough and our coping strategies aren't working, then we know we're hitting that burnout. So I thought that was a good point.
Yeah. Great. And just so everybody knows, we do compile all of the recommendations and store those on our Canvas page. If this was an actual case and you presented it, you would get everybody's breakout notes and recommendations sent to you. So that's another perk of doing a case presentation. But I really am thankful for this presentation and the great discussions that we've had. Just a reminder that our next session is May 20th. So hopefully we'll see all your wonderful smiling faces there, and we'll make JC bright and center again. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.